Would Florida State transfer wing Jamir Watkins be the final piece of the puzzle for Bill Self and the Kansas Jayhawks this offseason?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're doing a Kansas Jayhawks transfer portal target deep dive on Jamir Watkins, a transfer wing from Florida State, before that VCU. That would maybe be the final piece of the puzzle at this point in time. Kansas with 4 open scholarships, but maybe a couple of them go to, more developmental players. Maybe one goes to a backup big, and then that kind of leaves one spot for like another stud transfer addition. Would that end up being Watkins? So we'll get into his scouting report, what he would bring to the table. We'll also get to how he would fit in with KU and some latest news, some very big time transfer portal additions to the portal today as the portal is getting closer to wrapping up, but still continually getting some, possible all-conference, possibly even all-American candidates entering in the portal today and at this point in time. All right, let's start up with Jamir Watkins here. He is a 6'7", 210-pound wing. You can play him at the 3 or the 4. Heck, Florida State even played him at times as a point guard. So you're getting a lot of versatility in what you can get with Watkins. He'll be a 6th-year player. The reason why he'll be able to have his 6th year is he had the COVID year. He also had a medical redshirt year. But between VCU and Florida State, 5 seasons, again, 2 of them not counting eligibility, so 6th-year senior this next year of college basketball. He averaged 18.4 points per game, 5.7 rebounds, 2.4 assists, 1.2 steals, half a block per game. Shooting percentage, 42.7 from the floor, 32.1% from 3 on a little over 5 attempts from 3-point range per game. So, good numbers in terms of the volume of threes, but the efficiency is slightly below average there. 74.7% at the free throw line. Again, does a great job getting a bunch of volume there. 7.7 free throw attempts per game. Very good numbers there. Overall effective field goal percentage more in the below average half, 49%. 55.5 true shooting percentage is a little better there. The team was about 3.5 points better with him on the floor offensively, but they were about 3.5 points worse defensively with him on the floor. And then Bart Torvik gives him a 3.5 on his transfer grade, so to speak. I do think it's interesting in looking at some of the shooting percentages of a wing, comparing him to Jalen Wilson. Mentioned 42.7 from the floor, 32 from 3 on 5 attempts per game. Well, Jalen's last year at Kansas, when he was a first-team All-American, 43% from the floor, 33.7% from 3 on 5.8 attempts per game. Got to the free throw line a bunch, but not quite as much now. Watkins not as good of a rebounder or some of the other things maybe as Jalen, but there are at least some similarities there that you can make cross comparisons to in their game. Now, Watkins, we do have some real measurements on him. He was part of the combine, last year, and he measured 6'5" barefoot. So, with shoes, probably 6'6.5", 6'7", somewhere in that range. He has an 8'8" standing reach, which you might be wondering, is that good? Is that bad? Well, if you look at the NBA combine from last year, the average for a small forward, which he basically is, was 8'8.25". So he's basically average in standing reach, about 212 pounds there. He had a 35.5-inch max vertical, so that's about average too. Basically average measurements across the board for his position as a small forward there throughout those 3. And again, he's going to be 24 years old, so that gives him experience whatever team he joins. This was an excerpt from The Athletic. It says, Watkins has the best combination of size, athleticism, and defensive abilities of any wing in the portal. He should focus on getting to the basket and only shooting wide open threes. So wanting a little bit of a shift in his game, but really liking his size, athleticism, and defensive abilities among the wings in the portal. And interestingly enough, on CBB Analytics, the top statistical comp is a guy that a lot of KU fans wanted. That was Keyshawn Hall. So, that certainly makes him interesting. I think Hall, overall, I trust him a little more on the offensive end, but I think Watkins a better defensive player than Keyshawn Hall is. Now, you look at the strengths for Watkins. He's a solid athlete, like that excerpt said, solid size for a wing. And again, you could say, okay, well, those measurements, as I just went over, are more average, but that's comparing him to the guys who measured at the NBA draft combine, right? Those are the best of the best. And so if you're just comparing him to the college basketball public, he does skew on the, better end of, maybe he's not the most athletic or the longest, but he does, end up on the side of being more athletic, longer than a lot of other players, right? He throws down some really fun dunks. You see some of that athleticism come down there in transition. 99th percentile in fast break points per game. Efficiency wise, he's only slightly above average there, but he likes to get out in transition. Like I said, throws down some fun dunks. And I think you see the athleticism come into play on the defensive end of the floor. He's got an 82nd percentile steal rate, able to use that quickness and length to jump passing lanes. He uses his body and size well to bother opposing offensive guards. He's really switchable in the kind of offensive players he can defend. And I go back to some of the on-off numbers that didn't love him defensively, but people know him as a solid defender. So like what gives there? Because again, FSU was 3.6 points worse on defense with him on the court this year. Last year, they were 3.2 points worse when he was on the court defensively. His 2 years at VCU, they were 6 points worse with him on the floor defensively 1 year, and then they were 3 points better another. That means over 4 seasons, 3 of the 4, they've been worse with him on the floor defensively, and on average, it would be a couple points worse per game. So again, what gives there? I don't know if there's something to that, but I view a guy who is athletic, who does seem to be a good defender when you watch him and you see good steal numbers. And I kind of just think that might just be a noisy number. It's not like the team is 15 points worse when he's on the floor defensively. It's like a few points over. So I think that could just be something weird that's kind of going on there. Like I do view him as being a good defender, but he has the ability to create shots one-on-one. He's 74th percentile in isolation points per possession. He's also pretty good from the mid-range, 60th percentile here, although 60th percentile in the mid-range still is not that efficient of a shot overall, but nonetheless, he is decent there. Scoring inside has been a strength for him, 81st percentile in paint points per game, 80th percentile in second chance points per game. So he's crashing the glass there and converting it to points. He's only a 37th percentile at the rim, which is kind of odd because you would think a 6'7" athletic wing would be better at finishing at the rim. But he was 70th percentile in the paint. So he was better on kind of that floater area shot than he was at the rim. Getting to the free, maybe that just has to, Florida State wasn't the best team in the world. Maybe they just didn't have as much spacing, and that was the reason why. I don't know. Getting to the free throw line was a strength of him as well. 86th percentile free throw attempt rate. So he's getting to the line a lot, and he converts them too when he gets there. He's almost 75% at the line. He can also handle it a little. Mentioned he can run a little bit of point. He was in the 92nd percentile for his position in assist percentage. Just gives you another player out there who can be a good passer and move the ball around. And he's also good out of spot ups, 79th percentile in spot ups, and then 75th percentile as a pick and roll ball handler. And it's the spot ups that is probably most important there, being that, the ball would be in the hand a lot of Darren Peterson and now I guess Melvin Council and some of these other guys that you have to be able to play off ball. And yes, Watkins, if he joined KU, would still get plenty of opportunities to have the ball in his hands and make a play, but it wouldn't be as much as at Florida State because you have Darren Peterson, right? So you have to be able to play off the ball, and that's a good sign there. Now, some of the big questions for Watkins, shooting is the first big one. Only 25th percentile nationally, so in the bottom quarter of his position in college basketball in field goal percentage. He's also just 27th percentile in two-point percentage. And then the three-point percentage, 58th percentile for his position. It's actually slightly above average there, plus doing it on good volume. I don't know if there's something to this, but 60 career games against Ken Pom top 100 teams, his three-point percentage drops to 30%, as well as 29% from three in 29 career games against Ken Pom top 50 opponents. And not somebody who has, upped his game or stayed consistent against better competition. It has dropped off a little bit there. Off the dribble, too, has not been friendly to Jamir Watkins, just 19th percentile in effective field goal percentage off the dribble. And when you look at his game, I think some of the inefficiency off the dribble and inconsistency shooting is about shot selection. There are times he dribbles into contested shots. There are times he takes contested shots. And I don't know that that's always going to make Bill Self happy, right? The decision making, I think, is also a question here. I mentioned the poor shot selection. That is part of the decision making. Despite an effective field goal percentage of being in the 28th percentile in effective field goal percentage, he was in the 98th percentile for field goal attempts per game. So you're taking a lot of shots, even though it's not the most efficient. Now, the counter to that is you're having to take a lot of shots because your team wasn't that great, and so it's lowering your efficiency. And if you get on a team where you don't have to force shots as much, the efficiency is going to go up, right? But overall, when he was on the floor, the team's effective field goal percentage did go down. There is a little bit of an AJ Storr worry here, I think is a fair way to put it. But also you could say he's better at a lot of other things that Storr was not. But also going back to the decision-making, Watkins just in the first percentile, so one of the worst in the country in turnovers per game, also in the third percentile in fouls per game. So those are all things where it's like, okay, how would this really fit? And I think a smaller question here, rebounding, if he's in at the 4, maybe you just, if you had him, you'd play him at the 3 and Trey White would be your 4, but he's an above average defensive rebounder, 61st percentile for defensive rebound rate. So maybe it's fine, but just 10th percentile for offensive rebound rate. The year before he was 30th and 74th respectively in the two, which maybe is enough. And it's still more than you'd be getting with, Storr and Griffin. But basically if you're having to play him at the 3, you're needing him to shoot more. And do you have enough shooting there? Whereas if you play him at the 4, it's like, do you have enough rebounding there? So those are kind of some of the questions there. How exactly would he fit in with KU? Where does he rank among some of these other wings? Let's discuss that next on Locked On Jayhawks. Today's episode of LOJ is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick with 4K. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed, as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. Endless entertainment with 4K streaming. You can watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. And that gaming feature is so cool, especially because, sometimes it's a little bit tougher to, take your console on the go if you're traveling. It's a lot easier to take a Fire TV stick, right, and a controller. Much easier to have with you on the go and give you something to do when, maybe you're traveling for work or something and you don't have anything to do that night. Well, head over to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Jayhawks. Don't forget to make Locked On College Basketball your second listen every day. All right, how would Watkins fit in with KU? Well, let's start here. What would he add to the team? What would he help KU with? We've talked a lot about this with other players, and Kansas didn't get to the free throw line enough this past season. Well, Watkins gets to the free throw line a ton, so he would help Kansas in that area. You can never have enough defense. You can never have enough athleticism. You can never have enough wings. So from that standpoint, it would add to it. And you look at the roster KU is building, just if we're talking athleticism, Darren Peterson, obviously a good athlete. I think I look at Jaden Dawson as being a solid athlete, right? There's that highlight of him throwing down really a crazy dunk, right? Trey White's a good athlete. Floyd Badunga, obviously, if you're comparing him to other centers, especially, he is an insane athlete if you're comparing him at his position. Melvin Council, obviously very good athlete. This Kansas team should be able to run, get up the floor, and be really athletic, which is going to be really fun to watch. And he would fit right in with that and that style of play, and therefore help you more in transition. Kansas kind of faded off over the last 3 or 4 months of the season in transition play on the offensive end of the floor. Well, Watkins would add even more to what your transition play would be. It would also give you more shot creation, right? If you want even more shot creation, more guys who can create a shot and make tough shots as the shot clock is winding down or one-on-one in isolation possessions, he can get to his spots and make some of his shots. And then, like I said, the defensive versatility of if you throw him out there with White as 2 versatile wings on the defensive end with Flory blocking shots in the middle, and then you got Darren Peterson up top with either Council, who's a good defender and athlete, or Dawson, who's a good defender, or Marco, who's a good defender, like, I mean, that is a lockdown defensive lineup where there's not really any weaknesses and a bunch of guys are switchable. And that would be a ton of fun for what this team could be. Now, what it doesn't solve, though, is the shooting. I do think, like I said, I mean, for his position, he was at least above average in three-point shooting. He was doing it on good volume. So I don't think the shooting is a minus, but, it's not something where do you almost view it as, okay, Peterson, what are you going to get from a freshman you don't know? Is Dawson going to be starting or coming off the bench? Even though Dawson's viewed as a good three-point shooter, you're talking more 35, 36%. Flory, a non-shooter. Trey White, low-volume shooter. Does there need to be, El Marco, I don't know that shooting has been the primary strength of his game. Does there need to be more emphasis that whatever wing they bring in has to be like a really good three-point shooter, has to be a good three-point shooter as opposed to just one that's just kind of staying afloat there and doing other things well? Or do you continue to steer in to, athleticism and defense and two-way play and that dog mentality, those things being more of your identity? Or is it smart to, okay, you have that identity built, now it's good to kind of, add something else to push you over the top? I don't know. It also doesn't really hurt rebounding, but it doesn't significantly move the needle either. And Trey White's a really good rebounder. Flory's a really good, the rebound rates on Flory are great on both ends. I do think sometimes Flory got pushed around and maybe gave up too many offensive rebounds at times. So maybe you're looking for somebody to help with the defensive rebounds. But overall, I don't think it hurts you there kind of either. The biggest question for me is, would this be one that, would not totally get along with Bill Self? And so if you're looking at if he comes to the team, he could play the 3 or the 4. I think you'd probably want him more at the 3 with White at the 4, given the rebounding stuff. And when Peterson goes to the bench, you can even have him running some, point guard actions at times if he needs to. But then again, you also have El Marco and Melvin Council to where I don't know that you would need him to kind of do those things. But yeah, there could be certain plays where he kind of initiates the offense, right? But I got to kind of be honest here. Before I got into this deep dive, I thought Watkins would be a slam dunk, home run, excellent addition for KU, just surface level stuff. After getting into this a little more, I am wondering if there's maybe a little bit too many like AJ Storr similarities here. So Watkins was in the 99th percentile in usage rate. He had high turnover numbers. He had some questionable shot decisions, and albeit like he did have the ability to make some tough ones, right? And so it puts you somewhere on the spectrum of AJ Storr to Remy Martin, right? And I don't know where's Brandon Green in that spectrum? Is he even further down than AJ Storr? Is he above AJ Storr? I don't know. Where's Rylan Griffin in that, right? But Remy Martin might be at the top of it where it was shaky all the way through, but it worked out in the end, and you want a title. So like, there is a lesson there that if you can control the chaos a little bit, like you can have a lot of success out of it. But the flip side is if you don't, you end up in a similar situation to this past season, which you certainly don't want to have. And so I wonder about the shots like, and on a team where like, okay, Darren Peterson's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, that was part of the thing with like AJ Storr is like, okay, if AJ Storr's at Wisconsin and he's taking 15, 20 shots in a game and there are 3 or 4 of them where the coach is like, why'd you take that shot? Or that wasn't the best shot in the world. They kind of forced that one up. It's like, okay, he's going to get 10 other shots. Like, it's fine. You have to live with those. But when you were AJ Storr with Kansas this year, where it's like, no, Hunter Dickinson's going to get fed first, and then, X other players are going to get their opportunities, you might only get 3 or 4 shots in that specific game. And then 2 or 3 of them end up being kind of heat check shots where it's like, what was that shot? That doesn't work out. And so there would be a bit of a question for me there, right? Like, I mean, Peterson's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, right? Like, you're going to have other players who are sharing the ball a little bit and taking shots and stuff. To where like, is that going to be a problem? And I do all say that like part of the issue wasn't just with AJ Storr and Rylan Griffin, I guess more specifically in Storr's case, the shot selection and bad turnovers and questionable decisions and stuff like that. It was also that you didn't have the defense or the rebounding to lean back on for those guys. And that is at least one difference with Watkins, that he does have the defense to lean back on. And even though, yes, he's not the best rebounder in the world, he's an average rebounder, you would say, for his position, and that's more than Storr and Griffin can say. So like, it's a very complicated question because I definitely think this is like a take to some degree, but my problem here is you might only have enough NIL to make like one more big splash move, right? And so you need to be picky and choosy. And so, like, I'm looking at some other wings that are available right now, right? Like, I'm looking at Darian Williams. I'm looking at RJ Lewis. I'm looking at, I guess if you want to talk about a guy who entered today, which we'll get to here in a second, Andrei Stojakovic, right? I guess if you want to look at Tyron Stokes, the number one recruit in 2026, I'm looking at those guys and I'm like, okay, I think that makes more sense, that you need to explore all avenues to see if those guys would happen before this one. But if, those don't end up working out, I think you do take the risk on this, just knowing that, okay, if he is taking some bad shots, it's not going to be as quick of a hook as AJ Storr or Rylan Griffin, because he's going to defend on that end of the floor. And he's going to, at least provide you some other things. He can handle the ball a little bit. Like, you didn't really get much of that with Rylan Griffin or AJ Storr. Again, the defense is kind of the big thing there, and you're getting better rebounding than those guys. And at the end of the day, I think just a more complete basketball player. But again, I would be exploring my options on those guys first because of some of the worries, even though I do think it is a well-rounded enough basketball player that you can make it work. All right, what is some of the latest news in the portal? I mentioned Stojakovic. He wasn't even the biggest name to enter the portal today. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to make Locked On College Football your third listen after you make Locked On College Basketball your second listen every day. All right, some latest portal news. I mentioned Andrei Stojakovic. He is the son of Peja Stojakovic, one of the all-time greats in three-point shooting in NBA history. And he went to Stanford in year one, transferred to Cal in year two. It's interesting because the rub on him coming out of high school, and I think he was a five-star recruit, obviously his dad, I'm sure that plays into it a little bit, is that this dude's going to be a knockdown three-point shooter. That hasn't quite happened so far in his time, like low 30% from three. But year three as a former five-star recruit, like that's a lot of the times when we see those guys break out from a shooting. I always think of like Wayne Selden. Like that was the year for him when he kind of broke out to that level. So it wouldn't shock me if he does break out to that level, but he had a good season overall at Cal. And he would be somebody who he's 6'7". Cal played him at the 3 and 4. I guess you could maybe even play him at the 2 as a shooting guard if you wanted to play like a jumbo lineup. But realistically, I think he would make a lot of sense. You play him at the 3 if you're Kansas. He gives you that floor spacing and shooting. You play Trey White at the 4, and you kind of profit from there. I think that would make a lot of sense for KU. The other big name is PJ Haggerty, who transferred from Memphis, which he'll be on his 4th school in 4 years. He'll be a redshirt junior this year. He's going to make a lot of NIL money, like 21 points per game. He was one of the best scoring guards in the entire country from Memphis. He's insane at getting to the rim and, kind of shooting 2-point shots and getting to the free throw line and stuff like that. Just a really good scoring guard in general, and one that, I don't know, with Kansas already taking, I guess we live in this world now where like Kansas could be like, oh, we didn't know you were going to be available. And then they go all in for him. And then one of the players that, they already had committed ends up leaving for another school because the playing time's not there. Like that wouldn't be that crazy if that were to happen. But I don't know, somebody that's at least interesting there, because if you had Haggerty and Peterson, probably the best backcourt in the country. It certainly would be the most buckets from a backcourt, I would think, in the country. But you've also kind of steered in to fit here and tried to build this roster in a specific way. Does it make sense to kind of ditch that with Haggerty? I don't know. And then the other one was Dane Danger from Memphis, reportedly entered the portal, and then he tweeted like, I'm staying here, something like that. So I don't know what that's about. But he had a good season, probably out of the range of like, oh, would you want to be Fleury's backup? Probably too good to suppose for that, but they'll continue to look for backup big men. And maybe it just comes when the portal starts to dry up and players start to realize, hey, I don't have an opportunity to be a starter here, or the only place I can be a starter is at this, really low level school. I'd rather make more money and play 15 minutes per game off the bench, or 12 minutes, whatever it is for Kansas. I don't know. Also some KU football news that I wanted to get to here. KU football has a couple offers out to a couple edges, defensive ends. Eddie Kelly, he is an edge from Missouri. He was an 85 graded 3-star on 24/7 Sports out of high school, coming from the state of Florida. And then he has been all over as well. South Florida, then Georgia Tech, and then Missouri. Now he'll be on his 4th school this year. But somebody who has Power 5, it just feels like a depth play for me for KU, which, tells you they probably are looking to get another body in that defensive end room, right? And then they also offered Georgia State defensive end Cam Williams, who a bit of a smaller sample size in his play at Georgia State, but was good in the sample size that he did provide. And again, somebody who you figure would come in, and I don't know if the expectation would be to start, but he would give you another body. And obviously on the D line, you're rotating guys. Even if you're second or third string, you're still playing. The other one is, we mentioned on a previous show, Appalachian State transfer offensive tackle Markel Samuel was supposed to be visiting Kansas. Well, he wound up committing on his first visit, which was Oklahoma State. So he never ended up visiting Kansas, and that is one possible offensive lineman off the market. But it definitely seems like Kansas going for a defensive end. Definitely seems like Kansas going for an offensive lineman. Do they go for anything else outside of that in the portal? That remains to be seen, because it is officially open now for KU football. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll be back at you if there's any breaking news over the weekend, and also coming at you on Monday with more portal talk, more deep dives, all that and more right here with Locked On Jayhawks.